As I sat in my father's large leather chair, it creaked under my weight. His massive oak desk felt like a wall between us, even though he was no longer here. Richard Mitchell, founder of Mitchell Industries and my distant father, had died of a heart attack after 32 years of running the company. Now it was up to me to go through the mess he left behind. The combination should be in his personal files, Margaret said nervously from the doorway. She had been my father's secretary for over 20 years, guarding his office and his secrets. He changed it recently, but he always kept a record. I nodded, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Growing up, this office had always been off limits. Every time I asked to see him, my mother would say, "Your dad is busy with meetings." Even when I got older and wanted to join the family business, he always shut me down. "The business world isn't for everyone, Sarah," he would say. "Your art gallery suits you better." Now, as I flipped through his neatly organized files, those memories stunned more than ever. The board was meeting tomorrow to discuss the company's future, and I needed access to the financial records locked in his safe. As his only child, I had every right to see them. "Here it is," Margaret said, pulling a small notebook from a drawer. He wrote it down last month. The safe was hidden behind a painting, a Monet reproduction I had always admired. My hands shook slightly as I entered the combination. When the heavy door swung open, I expected to find financial reports. Instead, my eyes landed on a yellowed envelope. My name was written on it in my father's neat handwriting. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were adoption papers. Sarah Mitchell wasn't my real name. The room spun as I whispered, "Margaret, did you know?" She hesitated before nodding. "Yes. Your father made me promise never to tell you. He thought it would only hurt you." My hands trembled as I read the documents. I was born Sarah Collins to a teenage mother named Emily Collins in a small town 3 hours away. My adoption had been private, arranged through a lawyer who had since passed away. But there was more: medical records, DNA tests, and letters that made my stomach drop. My father knew who my biological father was. "Margaret," I said, my voice barely steady. "James Turner. He was my father's business partner." She went pale. "But he died in a car accident 30 years ago." I swallowed hard. 3 months after I was adopted. The truth hit me like a punch. My father had adopted me knowing I was his partner's illegitimate child. But was Turner's death really an accident? And if my father chose to take me in, why had he kept me at such a distance all these years? I dug deeper into the safe. There were financial records showing regular payments to my biological mother. Until 5 years ago. A note in my father's handwriting confirmed it. She passed away. Cancer. I looked up at Margaret, determination replacing my shock. "I need everything we have on James Turner. Old board minutes, contracts, everything." Margaret sank into a chair. "Sarah, it's complicated. The company's past isn't clean. Your father never wanted you to know." "What happened?" She sighed. "James Turner was brilliant but reckless. He made shady deals. When your mother got pregnant, he wanted to go public to clean up his act. But your father had just secured major investors. If Turner's secrets got out," she shook her head, "the company wouldn't have survived." I thought about the timing, my adoption, Turner's death, and the company's sudden rise afterward. Did Dad have something to do with the accident? Margaret hesitated. "I don't know. But after Turner died, your father changed. He threw himself into work and kept you at a distance. I think seeing you reminded him of what happened." The office felt too small, suffocating with secrets. I gathered the documents and slipped them into my briefcase. "The board expects me to hand the company over tomorrow," I said, mostly to myself. "They think I know nothing about business." Margaret frowned. "Don't you run an art gallery?" I gave a small, grim smile. I also spent the last 10 years secretly taking business classes at night. I always knew one day I'd have to fight for my place here. My phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. "Found more files in storage. Come early tomorrow. There's something you need to see." Tomorrow, the board would learn the truth. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just Richard Mitchell's adopted daughter. I was James Turner's flesh and blood, and I was done being kept in the dark. At dawn, I arrived at Mitchell Industries. The building was dark except for security lights. Margaret was waiting in the lobby, holding a dusty cardboard box. "These were sealed after James Turner died," she said. "No one's seen them since." Inside the box were financial records, old photos, and a leather-bound journal. The name on the cover made my breath hitch. James Turner. My hands shook as I opened it. He knew. I scanned the pages, my heart pounding. Richard has changed. The investors came in. And then the entry that made my blood run cold. He's not the same man who started this company with me. Something is coming. I can feel it. If anything happens to me, everything is documented in the offshore account. Margaret leaned in. Offshore account. I flipped through the pages and found account numbers and passwords written in the margins. He had been keeping records of everything. Shady deals, insider trading. All of it. He was either protecting himself or leaving a trail, Margaret said softly. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. A text from Thomas Baldwin, the CEO. Board meeting moved up to 8:00 a.m. Don't be late. I checked the time, 6:45 a.m. They were trying to catch me off guard. I need you to do something for me, I told Margaret, opening my laptop. Use these credentials to access Turner's offshore account. Download everything you find. And Margaret, don't tell anyone. She nodded, taking the journal. What are you going to do? I smiled, thinking about the board members who had always underestimated me. I'm going to give them exactly what they expect. The boardroom was full when I arrived at 7:55 a.m. 12 men in expensive suits sat around the table, looking at me with barely hidden smugness. Thomas Baldwin sat at the head of the table, my father's old seat. Sarah, he said, his voice full of fake sympathy. Thank you for joining us. We know this must be difficult for you. I took my seat, playing the part they expected, the grieving daughter, in over her head. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate everyone making time for this. Of course, he continued, we've prepared the necessary paperwork. Given your limited experience with the company, we think it's best if you sign over your voting rights to the board. You'll still receive all the financial benefits, of course. They slid the documents toward me. My heart raced as I waited for Margaret's signal. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Found everything. It's worse than we thought. I took a deep breath and looked up at Baldwin. This is very thorough, I said, pretending to consider the paperwork. But before I sign anything, I have a question. I met Baldwin's eyes. What do you know about James Turner? The room went silent. The temperature seemed to drop. Baldwin's smile faltered. James Turner. That was before my time. But he was your father's early business partner, wasn't he? Died in a car accident. That's the official story, I said, standing up. I walked to the screen at the front of the room and plugged in my laptop. But the truth is more interesting. Documents appeared on the screen, financial records, emails, photographs. James Turner didn't just die in an accident, he was murdered. And everyone in this room who has been with the company for over 30 years knows why. This is absurd, Baldwin snapped. You can't just throw around wild accusations. I turned to him, my voice calm. These aren't accusations. These are facts. James Turner was my biological father, and he left proof of everything. Proof that my father tried to bury when he adopted me. The older board members had gone pale. They remembered. They knew. Turner was going to expose everything, I continued. The insider trading, the corporate espionage, the bribes. My father couldn't let that happen. So Turner had an accident. I was adopted, and everyone in this room helped cover it up. If what you're saying is true, Baldwin said carefully, then your father was involved in criminal activity. Exposing this could destroy the company. I smiled and pulled a document from my briefcase. That's where you're wrong. My lawyers reviewed everything. The statute of limitations has expired on the original crimes. The company is safe. The only ones at risk are the people who helped cover it up, including some of you. I laid another stack of documents on the table. This is my proposal. I take over as CEO, effective immediately. Anyone who objects can explain to the SEC why they helped hide a murder for 30 years. The room was silent. You can't do this, Baldwin whispered. You don't know anything about running a company. Actually, I said, pulling out my final document, my business degree. I know quite a bit. I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know why until now. One by one, the board members exchanged glances. They knew they were trapped. All in favor of appointing Sarah Mitchell as CEO? Baldwin asked hollowly. The vote was unanimous. As the board members left, looking stunned, Margaret appeared at the doorway. "There's something else you need to see," she said quietly. "It's about your mother, your biological mother." I felt my heart skip a beat. "What about her?" "She didn't die of cancer 5 years ago." I froze. "What?" Margaret met my eyes. "She's alive, and she's been trying to contact you." The address Margaret gave me led to a small house on the outskirts of the city. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at the modest home where my biological mother supposedly lived. According to Margaret's research, Emily Collins hadn't died of cancer. That was another lie my father had orchestrated. She had been receiving regular payments from a Mitchell Industries subsidiary, hush money. But 5 years ago, she started asking too many questions. Questions about me. That's when my father faked her death records to keep me from ever finding her. Finally gathering my courage, I walked to the front door. Before I could knock, it opened. A woman in her early 50s stood there. She had my eyes. "Sarah," she whispered, covering her mouth. "I knew you'd come eventually." Her name was Emily. Over coffee in her small kitchen, she told me everything. She had been 19 when she met James Turner, young and naive, working as a receptionist at Mitchell Industries. Their affair had been brief but intense. "When I got pregnant," she said, "James promised to leave his wife. He wanted to make things right, but then Richard Mitchell, your adoptive father, showed up." She tightened her grip on her coffee cup. "He offered me a deal. Give up the baby for adoption. Stay quiet about James. In return, he'd make sure we were both taken care of for life." "Did you know what happened to Turner?" I asked softly. She nodded, tears in her eyes. "James called me the night before the accident. He said he had proof of everything Richard had done. He was going to expose it all. He told me he wanted us to be a family." She wiped her eyes. "The next morning, he was dead." "Why did you ever try to find me before?" "I did," she said, "many times. But Richard had ironclad legal agreements. If I contacted you, I'd lose everything. And worse, he threatened to take everything from you too. I couldn't do that to you." I swallowed hard. "What changed 5 years ago?" She gave me a sad smile. "I saw you in a magazine. It was an article about your art gallery. You looked so much like James. I couldn't stay away anymore. I started asking questions. That's when Richard cut me off, faked my death records." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the offshore account documents. It was time to finish what Turner had started. Margaret had found the evidence Turner left behind. Dad couldn't destroy it because he didn't have the account information. The truth had been waiting to come out for years. Emily reached across the table, touching my hand gently. "What are you going to do now?" "I'm taking control of Mitchell Industries," I said. "The board voted this morning, but first, there's something I need to do." That afternoon, I stood in my father's hospital room. He looked smaller than ever, propped up on pillows. "You found everything," he said. "Yes." I stepped closer. "I know about Turner, about my real parents, about what you did." He closed his eyes for a moment. "I gave you a good life, Sarah. Everything I did was for the company." "No," I corrected him. "You did it for yourself, never for me. You have to understand." "I understand perfectly." My voice was steady. "You killed my father, adopted me to keep my mother quiet, and spent 30 years hiding the truth." "I loved you," he whispered. "You weren't just a deal to me. Watching you grow up, you became my daughter in every way that mattered. But you never trusted me, never let me near the company. Was that love or guilt?" He had no answer. I placed a folder on the table beside him. "These are the new company bylaws. I'm the CEO now, effective immediately. You can fight it, but if you do, the truth about Turner will come out. The company won't survive that scandal." He stared at me for a long moment. "You really are James Turner's daughter." He had the same look when he knew he had someone cornered. "I'm my own person," I said, standing up. "Not James Turner's daughter, not Richard Mitchell's, just me, and I'm done living with your lies." As I reached the door, he called out, "Sarah, I'm sorry." I turned back one last time. "Take care of yourself, Dad. The nurses have my number if there's an emergency." The next few months were full of changes. I moved my office to another floor. I couldn't work in the place where so many lies had been told. Several board members resigned, including Thomas Baldwin, and I replaced them with people I trusted. Emily, Mom, became a big part of my life. filling in the missing pieces of my past. A year later, I stood in front of Mitchell Industries employees, announcing a new beginning. The name on the building had changed to Turner Mitchell Industries, honoring both parts of my history. 30 years ago, this company was built on secrets and lies, I told them. Today, we start fresh with honesty, integrity, and transparency. That evening, I visited James Turner's grave for the first time. Emily came with me, holding my hand as I placed flowers on the weathered stone. "He would be proud of you," she said softly. "I hope so," I replied. "But more importantly, I'm proud of myself." Back in my office, I gazed out at the city lights, thinking about how the truth had the power to both destroy and heal. The painting that once hid my father's safe was gone. In its place was a photograph of James Turner and Richard Mitchell on the day they started the company, smiling, arms around each other, unaware of how it would all end. Next to it, I hung a new picture of Emily and me at my first board meeting as CEO. Different generations, different stories, but now connected by truth. Dad was still in rehab, recovering. We spoke occasionally, our conversations careful and measured. Maybe one day we find a way forward. For now, the truth was both a bridge and a barrier between us. I picked up a framed magazine article from my desk. The headline read, "Sarah Mitchell, Uncovering the Truth and Transforming an Empire." I smiled. They had no idea the real story wasn't about business. It was about a daughter discovering who she really was, about long-buried secrets finally coming to light, and about the power of truth to set us free.